I'm an open book.
Literally.
Literally.
Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads and today I'm delighted to be joined by Jess Phillips MP.
Hello.
I feel like that's the only way that you're allowed to be addressed.
There's one member of Parliament, his name's Alex Chalk, he's a Conservative member for Cheltenham, and he always only ever refers to me, even like when we bump into each other in the TV, as the outspoken Jess Phillips MP. Like every time he sees me, so.
Well, every time I ask you a question I'm just going to be like, Jess Phillips MP, what do you think about this? But those of you who've been watching my channel a while will know last year I read Truth to Power, actually in this form, and was totally and utterly blown away by it because I was in a real point of nonchalance, apathy. We all know those terms. They've been bandied around a lot. And this made me feel really empowered, like I could do something. What led you to writing this book at that time? It almost seems like a daft question, really, with what's going on in the world.
The world is crackers, isn't it? The world, and it's not just here that feels crackers, it's global. People are more sort of in tune with politics than they have ever been before, and it became like a soap, like certainly through the Brexit votes in Parliament, it became like you were living in a real life soap opera. And you'd talk to ordinary people in the Tesco and they'd say things like, oh, I've been watching you, and you think, on what? And they're like, on the Parliament channel. And there was one week where the Parliament channel had something like 8 million viewers, like more than X Factor.
Imagine that. More than Strictly. We're going to come to Strictly later.
I shouldn't have thought so. How could anything be better? So I was hyper aware that politics was becoming much more rooted in people's lives. But I get hundreds of emails every month from people who say, I'm interested in politics, or I'm interested in activism, or I like what you've done around women's rights and I want to know what I can do. And it's a really broad and difficult question to answer. Like, well, what can I do to help? And so it depends where you live, depends what you're interested in, depends what political persuasion you are. And I find it really, really hard to sort of direct people to exactly how you sort of step up to become an activist, how you can change things. And so I decided, instead of writing thousands of emails and mentoring thousands of people, I thought I'll just write this book because it sort of helps answer the questions about what's good and what's bad and how to go about feeling like you can change things. Because the reality is that you can.
Yeah, no.
People need to be told, and I meet people who come and say, "Oh, well, what's the point?" all the time, like, "Oh, I can't change it," and I just think that is the machine feeding you that line. You certainly can't change everything, but you can change some things, and you should definitely try.
You talk about in the introduction about fear and how, and also there's a part in the book which is all about feeling the fear, and you're saying that you have a really interesting insight into fear, and I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so maybe I'm wired wrong, and I think quite a lot of people in politics are wired this way, which is not necessarily always a good thing. I find that fear for me is the greatest fuel, and I quite like doing things that scare me. And most people, that's why people go on roller coasters. It's maybe I'm not that unusual.
You stand opposite Theresa May.
Exactly, it's the same
or
thing.
Boris, although I don't really want to
yeah, I hate roller coasters actually, certainly. But I find that if I'm frightened to do something or I'm scared of what the possible outcome is that triggers something in my brain that says, if you're scared to do something, it means there is an oppressor, there is something wrong, and you're onto something. If you're frightened to speak up for your rights, if you're frightened to be who you are, then something's wrong, and it won't be changed. You won't be less scared. You won't feel less fear in the long run by doing nothing. And so I use sort of like that, the very acute fear rather than long-term fear for the future. I use very acute fear to drive me like a fuel. Doing nothing changes nothing. And if I'm scared, if you're working somewhere and you're scared of your boss and you're scared to speak up against them, which is worse, the immediate fear, and you have to assess this, and I'm not saying I don't have the answer because I'm not in everybody's situation, the immediate fear of speaking up, or working somewhere where someone's abusing you for 2 years. But we get used to the small fear, the general discomfort of life, we get used to it. and the acute fear feels scary, but it's better to feel a little bit of fear in the beginning than a crappy life forever.
But do you find anxiety, because anxiety is something people talk about a lot at the moment, I think we've talked about anxiety more in the last 3-4 years than we ever have. There is something that actually you can use anxiety to fuel in a positive way. Like every time I do an interview like this, I get anxious and nervous beforehand, but actually that's what keeps me going and gets me through.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really like small drama compared to some of the dramas going on in the world, but do you know what I mean?
But don't do that. Don't do what you do what everybody does and think that your experience, your anxiety is lesser because somebody has it worse. In reality, everybody's experience is their experience, and you can't, I constantly say to my children, you don't know you're born, there's people, I'm constantly citing some children who live in some terrible area where terrible things are happening. But the reality is that everybody's anxieties are real. Yeah. It doesn't matter if somebody's is worse. Your anxiety is real, and it feels real to you. But yeah, I like that. But I'm able to read it as adrenaline rather than, because nothing I've ever done that was good wasn't terrifying. Like having a baby was terrifying. Deciding to become a mum was terrifying. Deciding to leave home and go to university was terrifying. Deciding to do everything that has meant you progress. Very few things in life where you take a step forward aren't absolutely terrifying because you've never done it before. Yeah. So I find that feeling of adrenaline, I get frightened every single time I speak in the House of Commons. I feel nervous. Practice makes all of those things easier, of course. But I think that if you, as my mum or somebody else wise once said to me, if you don't feel frightened anymore, don't feel nervous, you should stop doing it.
Exactly.
You should stop doing what you're doing.
I think that's really true. How did you choose? Because there's 7 ways you let us know, and what you do, which I love, is you almost give us like the ammunition and the plan of action as how you can make even the smallest change, but you also talk about the really big changes. How did you go about selecting the 7 ways in which we can make? Because was it that like 5 and you're like, maybe I need a bit more, or was it like I've got 203 and I need to whittle it down?
No, actually, I think it was more sort of. There was like 5, I'd say, and then I was a bit like, and then there's this, and I've written too much around this, so it's better to break it down and make it as simple as possible. And as easy and accessible, because I never ever, when I write books, because I'm a politician as well, when I write books, I find that always in my mind is who is reading this, and that person is, I do this in politics as well. Whenever I'm in meetings, I have an invented person in my head, and she's called Brenda, and she works in Asda, and
that's amazing.
Yes, and I ask myself, how would Brenda in Asda experience this and hear it? So when I speak, when I write, when I do anything, I try and make it as accessible as possible. So when I was coming up with the different ways, if I'd sort of gone off on a bit of a tangent, I was then a bit like, okay, this is much more about how people will feel scared, this is much more about how people will come back at you, this is much more about how you should enjoy it. And also I think that maybe there was definitively 6, but the sort of last bit about enjoying it, because I've been really honest about how it can be difficult and how it's hard, and I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not, and if it was easy everybody would be doing it all the bloody time, and we would live in like an absolute democracy where you got to vote on absolutely everything, which would be tedious. The idea of the last bit, the sort of 7th thing, being about it being uplifting, and the reason why you should want to do it, not just because it's the right thing, because it's fun.
Yeah,
it's like, it's great. It's a great thing to do, even if it is just like got the street cleaned, and then you walk down the street and it's clean, and you, just because you wrote a letter to your MP or whatever, you think, well, I did that, and that is just like back of the neck. There's just so few things in life that are actually like finished, complete, done. Like that's why I like the dishwasher. It's like a job that has an end.
See, I like filling it, but I'm not so great at emptying
No, I don't like emptying it. That's the responsibility of my sons. That's why I had children. But I like filling the dishwasher because it is a job. And it's like this bit, this. Oh, it's all done. And then I like the doneness of it. And so, yeah, I think it was more sort of 6 things that were about the sort of perils and the process, and then one that was just about how excellent it is.
Well, also, it gives you that hope. How did you go about choosing who you would use as examples for these things? Because again, that must be a thing where you've got so many possibilities, which is a really positive thing.
Yeah, by and large, the people I chose, I wanted to choose specific stories that were about people who were as ordinary as possible. So aside from Tom Watson taking on the news of the world, which is an extraordinary thing to do, aside from that, all of the people who I tracked and wrote their stories and interviewed were people I had come across in my working life prior to being a Member of Parliament or since being a Member of Parliament, who were just like the David to a Goliath. And these aren't small Goliaths that they were taking on. One of them was taking on the entire state of Malta, like all of their government. One of them was taking on Harvey Weinstein, like huge Uber, like, so that they were people who had taken on
Trump.
Trump.
Sorry to mention him.
They'd taken on these immense, but fundamentally they were just ordinary. Like, there's one of the case studies in the book is a woman called Sarah Robotham who sort of blew the whistle on all of the sexual grooming of girls in the Northwest. And when I went to interview her, like, I had this in my mind. I wanted ordinary people, and she'd been like a social worker and a sexual health worker, and like I had in my mind that she was ordinary. And then when you sat in front of her in her house, I mean, it's like she's taken ordinary classes. It's like there is nobody just more down to earth than this woman. And she's been played in dramas by Maxine Peake, and she's had endless things written about her, and she's just like shouting at the dog while she's trying to make me a cup of tea and dropping things on the floor. And the idea of their ordinariness and their is really, really important, because the point is that often people like Sarah, people like Zelda who took on Harvey Weinstein, like, they become chain breakers, and they become famous for being chain breakers. And we, like Doreen Lawrence, a woman I work with regularly in the House of Commons, they get seen, they become exceptions, they become exceptional by the actions that they have taken. But when you spend any time with them, you realise they're not that exceptional, that they are just ordinary people who, when faced with something, stepped up just like anybody could. And they would argue back to you all the time. They would say, you could do it. You could do everything that I did. And every single one of them said that. And so I wanted specifically to talk to these people who were just like your everyday common man and woman, because that's who I wanted to talk to. I was talking to Brenda from Asda.
That's Brenda from Asda.
And I wanted to tell her that if she wanted to take on the entire Walmart chain of Asda's, that she could.
And that's the thing I did when I talked about it last year. I wanged on about it quite a lot. That's the technical term I like
Wanged
to
on,
use.
yeah.
It made me feel really empowered. How do you keep that fire in your belly?
There's always something to be cross about. To be fair, if you were to spend just one Friday in here in normal times, all of the chairs around here are filled with people, and it's not just that they have problems, it's that they have hope as well, that their problems can be dealt with. When I worked in women's refuges, people would be like, well, that must be really, really depressing. And I was like, no, it's a place of hope. You're stepping towards making your situation better here and there. And if you in here, you encounter so many things that are unfair to be cross about, and so many people who it's worth, like, because you'll meet people with in terrible situations, homeless, living in a hotel room with 5 other people in the same room, have done for 7 months waiting for appropriate property, having to have food parcels every single day, and they will sit in here and take the piss out of you and joke with you and be human and kind and ask how you are. And you say that idea that your anxiety is your own, and it doesn't matter if someone's in a worse situation. They will say to me, oh God, Jess, I've been so worried about you. I read about people being horrible to you. Oh, I couldn't live like you. And it's just like this level of inspiration that I get from the ordinary people who come in and see me for their issues, and that's why I'm moving office, so I can have a bigger office, so I can still have people in, because I could do it all day long, and there are as many interesting stories as there are people, and frankly I should, you know, give them some royalties, because they all end up in one way or another littered in anything that I write. The funniest things that I ever write, I want you to know, have been said directly to me by some octogenarian from Yardley. They are hilariously funny, in the face of misery often, and that there's nothing that will keep you getting out of bed every day like that.
Have you ever had a point, like I was thinking about this earlier, where I've had moments in my life where I should have spoken up and I haven't? Have you got like any advice for how people can use that as a power without you just beating yourself? Because I still beat myself.
Right, for a start off, the first thing I would say is everybody, I mean, I'm gobby as anything, and I were like, what did you just say? About almost everything. I mean, literally on my gravestone it'll be like, what did you just say to me? Is what it should say on my gravestone. I literally said it to a man this weekend. I was like, what did you just say to me? Like I'm in some sort of soap opera. But I do. Everybody does it. Everybody does that. Everybody hears somebody say something and feels like they should have challenged it more, and sometimes we just don't have the language to challenge it, that we feel is consensual, because most people don't run towards conflict. I quite like a bit of a scrap, but even I don't like, you know, when a man was insulting towards me at the weekend, I immediately reacted like somebody, you know, like I was up for a brawl, and then I calmed immediately and said that's not a very nice way to speak to somebody. And so people will naturally try and de-escalate conflict. Most people, not everybody.
I'm learning from watching the Real Housewives.
Oh really?
Because they don't shy away.
I know, but don't ever be that person. Don't mistake, right? That those people who say this sentence, I've just got to be true to myself. Those people are awful. What they mean is, I am using truth as a cover to be a bitch.
Yes.
That is not acceptable.
No, it's just, I think what I'm learning from them is
they don't let anything pass.
Yeah, to confront stuff more.
So everybody people don't like conflict, but what they don't have often is the adept language necessary to challenge something without it seeming like you're having a pop at somebody. And so you can say you shouldn't say that, and that immediately puts you at loggerheads, and you're probably not going to change that person's mind. Whereas if you say, I'm not sure that's right actually, and I'm going to say back to you what I do with my constituents, because people say outrageous things to me on the doorstep regularly. And so what I have learned to do, and because I practiced, and I don't want to be rude, I don't want to be like, get out. I mean, I've done that on occasion. Okay, get out of my office, I'm just not having you speaking to me or my staff like that.
Today.
I would just throw you out. Get out of my office. How dare you? I tend to say, I'm going to repeat back to you what you've just said to me. I'm going to ask you how it sounds and how you'd hear it. It's very hard when you're angry though,
well, in that moment,
not to go like, have you got any evidence of this? And like, so it's easy for me to do it now because I'm practiced and I'm pretending that a lot of the time I am like, well, that's very interesting that you should say that, because in reality, so you have to just check your tone if you don't want confrontation. But you shouldn't beat yourself up for not speaking up, because you beating yourself up for not speaking up is exactly what the powerful system wants you to do.
Yeah. Which is very much highlighted.
Yeah.
in this. What would you say to people who feel that they can't get into politics, or are feeling like they're just lost because there's so much of it going on?
If you're interested in politics but are finding it all really overwhelming, pick a thing that you're really interested in and focus on it. So if you're really interested in social care, in the NHS, if you're really interested in housing, if you're really interested in homelessness, if you're really interested in women's rights, in gay rights, in whatever, like read the stuff about that. Because there is when you first get elected, you get like a million emails that say like, will you join the all-party parliamentary group on the 17,000 different sorts of cancer? You get one for each. Will you join it on walking in the hills? Will you join it on walking in the streets? There's one for calligraphy, there's one for Morris dancing. And you
is that real?
That's real. There's one for calligraphy and one for Morris dancing. I don't know if they're defunct, but when I got there, it's like on the list. So focus on your town.
Yeah.
Focus on your
a specific
the
interest
thing.
that you've got.
Either I always say focus either geographically, based on a community, based on a bigger community, or on a policy area that you can genuinely change.
And what about the other way around? What about people who've got so embedded in politics they can't let it go? What?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry, my stepdad Tim.
Tim, come on, dude.
But like, how do you kind of? Because I think that can actually make you feel even more like you can't do something.
Yeah.
Because when it's constantly consuming, and I think that's what
I
I'm saying
think
about
I think that is it is very, very, very hard when it's the quickest way to apathy, actually, that you're all the same, when you feel constantly like, if you watch, and I get it, you know, I sit across from these people and I think you've made mistake after mistake after mistake, and you always rise to the top. Like, it's like some people just fail up, and I just get like, I'm going to have to opt out because I'm so cross. It's so all consuming that it just seems like nothing could ever change. I get that feeling a lot, and that is very, very difficult to deal with. And people shouting at their telly at home will know how that feels, because everybody, you know, anybody who's ever watched Question Time is like, but all I can say is that, yeah, you just have to try and get as much perspective as you can, step back a little bit, and think about the thing that is the most important, or the thing that you can actually change. So if, for most people, the thing that they can change is they can vote.
Yeah. But then I guess some people don't feel like they can do that for 3 years, which makes them feel a little bit...
Oh yeah, tense, yeah. But then put that energy into genuine activism. Like, go ring up the local political party that you like, or if not, like, find an issue locally that you care about, and make those politicians who you... So if you've got a politician from the opposite party to the one that you would normally support, or you don't like any of them, let's face it, that's totally possible, you don't like any of them, like, find something that you do care about and try and make them care about it. Put it directly into your personal representative, you know, challenge them on it, because, yeah, voting only comes around. I mean, it came around quite regularly for a while.
It did a little bit.
I've
got some... Now, first question, actually, my stepdad wanted me to ask you this. How do you deal with backlash, and how do you deal with social media when people... He was saying, like, he feels like you're constantly got at. How do you find that? And also, like, the whole cancel culture that's kind of become so prevalent. How can you answer that in a very short space of time?
Yeah, okay. So how do I deal with it? I don't sometimes, is the answer, and sometimes I let it get really on top of me, and the backlash is hard, and it will temper the things I say, and it will silence me. However, when it's got a sort of saturation point, so your stepfather, is right. Well done, Tim, is that it doesn't matter what I say, I will be got at. So yesterday I put out a tweet about school trousers, finding navy versus black school trousers for one of my children. Controversial. And immediately you'll get stuff back. You know, you'll get somebody talking to you about something that's nothing to do with it. You'll get somebody having a pop at you. And then because of that level of saturation about anything you say, you start to realise it's a nonsense.
Right.
So if it was, I'd gone out and said something I deeply believed in, and I'd suffered really thoughtful critique, that would be hard. But the sort of volume and saturation of it now means I don't even see it. The death threats and the things like that is hard to deal with, and at moments I don't cope with it. But I tend to find that if it's bad, it's bad when other things are bad. Like, I'm stressed about other things, but that's like any sort of anxiety. You can cope with one thing to be anxious about, but when they start to pile on top of each other, because you've not met a deadline, you're worried about paying your bills, and it gets like, and then someone threatens to kill you, and the whole house of cards can fall down. But mostly, you just have a process that you go through. I know what the process is. I take it to the police. I do this. I inform these people. I make sure that I've thought about this bit of safety. And so you just have a process, and that helps. As for cancel culture, it's worth worrying about. You know, if it makes me not say stupid things sometimes, you know, then that's a good thing potentially. Like, I think like being a bit famous makes you polite. If there is an element where people are more worried about saying the offensive things they were going to say, then that's okay. However, it often doesn't act in good faith. It's like, I know there are people waiting, and anything slightly that it would be perfectly acceptable for anybody else to say. Brenda from Asda, that they will take you down, and that is, you know, it's not particularly healthy environment.
No, well, I know there was, and this is something that people have mentioned a few times myself in interviews. They were talking about a tweet from ages ago where you were treated that was from a not very trans positive.
Yeah.
And they're all going, "Oh God, can you bring it up?" And I was like, "Go and see the interview she's done with Juno Dawson." I was like, "Just go," because people don't educate themselves enough. They see. But this is where I think cancel culture is becoming really unhealthy, because they make an assumption based on one thing. So I think that's just something that
But
I've
also,
noticed.
I just don't believe that people are either, or anyone really, or anything, organisation or otherwise, are perfect or belong in the bin. I just don't
It's
believe.
not either or.
Yeah, I think
There's
that
that
most
grey
people
area.
belong in the bin sometimes and are excellent other times.
We have to interrogate things more, don't we? And I think
Yeah,
that's something we've got a bit lazy
also,
of just making an
I
assumption.
just think that most people are brilliant and idiots as well. You
All at
know,
once.
I think everybody has the. I mean, not everybody. There's some real outliers who are absolute knobs. But
My favourite word at the moment is bellend.
Bellend, yeah.
Don't know where it's come
There's
back.
plenty of them about, isn't there? And some people, maybe, and I think this about the people I work with who are conservative. I thought they were all bellends, and I got there and I realised that 90% of them wanted to change the world for the better too, but they just don't
It's a
agree
different
with the
opinion.
way I think
Yeah.
we should do it. They want the same end result as I want. And then there's like 10% who are just massive bellends. Unfortunately, they're mainly in the cabinet. They're the ones who rise to the top. I just don't believe that people are all evil or
All good.
perfect.
Yeah.
And so this the idea of cancel culture, if we were to call it that, and it just doesn't stack up in reality. People should be able to be forgiven.
I'm going to go to some very quick fire questions
Okay.
from social media, because social media is a good place as well as a
Oh God, love it,
absolute bin.
absolutely love it.
So lots of people at Rambling Bookshop just wanted to let you know that you're fab.
Oh, that's kind.
So that was lovely. Lauren of Lauren and the Books, who I adore and is a massive Strictly fan, just said, "Fucking hell, I'm well excited about this." As in me and you doing this.
Oh right, I thought like we were going on Strictly then. I was like,
We
what have
might
you
be,
heard?
We might be together. So,
would
but
be
speaking
amazing.
of Strictly,
Yeah.
how excited are you about the new Strictly?
I'm really excited, although I'm getting to that. Although this happens every year, and every year I feel a bit sad about it. I didn't know who some of the people were, so I'm getting to that age where I'm like, is that a celebrity? Who are the Damage or whatever that band is called?
Would
The
you ever do it?
Wanted. I'd absolutely do it. I wouldn't do it whilst I was still a politician, because there's just absolutely no way I'd be able to find the time. But afterwards, for shizzle,
Get the glitter on.
I would
She's
totally
ready.
do it.
Two,
Not that good at
Cher.
dancing.
I think the first song you need to do when you do it is a Cher ABBA cover.
Well, I have to say, my karaoke song that I would always sing would be "Turn Back Time" by Cher. So
What more could you want?
no, I could do like I could dress it. I'm not sure
On a
that is
cannon.
what anybody wants to
She
see.
wore that in her latest concert. She
What,
had
that
the
money
exact
stocking?
outfit on. It was amazing. And at the end, when she'd
old
finished
is
doing
she?
Believe, she went. She after everyone clapped on her, she went. She took the mic and said, "What was your granny doing tonight?" And then that was it. She disappeared. She was amazing. Anyway, there's Cher Appreciation Society going
She's
on.
supporting the Democrats as well in the election, wasn't it?
So, Paul's Books would like to know, did you ever have a panic that you didn't have a life plan in your mid-20s?
I know I had 2 children in my mid-20s, so I didn't have time to worry about plans.
Paul's Books, no.
No, I've never had I've literally never had a plan to do anything or a plan for anything. But many people are different, and some people really feel the need to have a plan. I like to just see what's going to happen today. But no, definitely didn't worry about having a plan. Very, very tired in my mid-20s, or either very fat with baby.
Ashley Hawkins said, will Jess reconsider and run for Labour Party leader again, please? There isn't actually a vacation going.
Yeah. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? Because, you know, I mean, there isn't, and my job at the moment is to make sure that Keir Starmer becomes the Prime Minister. So, and I would forego anything to make there be a Labour Prime Minister at the moment. So yeah, no, that's my job at the moment. But maybe one day.
In the future?
Well, yeah, you know, unless obviously my dazzling tango career takes off.
Jenny Cook reads, I love this question. If you're invisible for a day, what would you do, and which politician would you fuck with?
God. I mean, it's a toss-up, isn't it, to like mess about with somebody you really, really hate, or just wind up your mates, because winding up your mates is really good fun. But I mean, obviously, if I was invisible for the day, I'd go and spy on Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. I know it's boring.
Go for an eye test with them.
Yeah. I've not been to Barnard Castle, but it's really been put on the map, hasn't it?
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, apparently it's beautiful.
Apparently so. Harrow, is it me you're looking for? That's a good handle. Has momentum been lost to improve diversity in politics?
Has momentum been lost to
improve
diversity? Well, I hope not. It's literally like, I feel like what I was put on this earth to try and improve, and certainly with regard to class as well as all of the other characteristics that are lacking. I think that we should never ever take our foot off the pedal. As soon as you think that these things are going well and you stop having targets and you stop putting in positive discriminations and things naturally slip back until we've had 100, 200 years of a diverse power structure. It will always slip back to the default without constant effort from the activists. And so, yeah, we need to keep our foot on the pedal, definitely. We've got more women. There's more than 50% of the Labour Party representatives in Parliament are women now, though. So, but I'm not going to take my foot off the pedal. No.
Bookish Betsy would like to say, are you committed to including disabled women, trans women and women of colour in your feminism?
Of course. Absolutely, 100%. I think that actually the from all the study I've done of equality is the biggest area of discrimination, certainly in employment law, is against disabled people, like that, more likely to be discriminated against on the basis of a disability than pretty much anything else these days. Certainly in a work environment, you can't, finding work and keeping work, and in Parliament, the representation of disabled people is woeful.
I think it is on almost all fronts, really.
Oh, absolutely, on boards, on all of those
but also
fronts.
For all those groups.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, absolutely.
We need change across the boards, literally, as it were.
Across the boards. That is a great name for a campaign. Let's do it. But yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because I have all sorts of privileges being a white feminist. There's no two ways about that. And also the age thing as well. Older women are terribly discriminated against in ways that younger women aren't. Younger women face threats in ways that older women don't. So that you can't just have feminism that is one size fits all. It has to be for everyone, or it's for no one in the long run.
Well, Jess Phillips, thank you so much. I can't recommend everyone read Every Woman and Truth to Power. As you know, I've wanged on about both of these. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
No worries, my pleasure.
And until next time, it's bye from me. Bye.